my dog found your missing mother.
Can you please take me there?
The woman had been left to die. Not quickly, not mercifully. Whoever chained her to that pipe in the dark wanted it slow, wanted the cold to do it first, then the thirst, then the infection crawling up from her wrists where the zip ties had bitten through skin and into something wet beneath. 3 months. 91 days in a concrete room with no window, no light, no voice except the rats and the steady drip of water she couldn't reach. 91 days of a mother whispering her son's name into the dark like a prayer she no longer believed would be answered. She had stopped praying on day 87. On day 91, a dog found her. Not a police dog, not a search and rescue K-9 unit dispatched by the most powerful criminal organization in Seoul, which had been tearing the city apart for 3 months looking for this woman. A mutt. A 26-pound rescue mutt named Bomi with a torn ear and a limp in her back left leg, being walked at 11 at night by a veterinary clinic assistant named Han Yuna who earned 2 million won a month and couldn't afford to adopt the dog she fostered. Bomi found the most dangerous man in Seoul's missing mother in an abandoned printing warehouse in Mapogu. And Yuna, who had never broken a law, never held a weapon, never spoken to anyone more powerful than her building's landlord, decided to walk to the mafia boss's front gate and knock. This is what happened next. The rain had been falling for 6 hours when Bomi stopped. Not slowed. Stopped, locked rigid on the sidewalk, every muscle in her small body drawn taut, her nose lifted toward the alley between the shuttered fish market and the abandoned warehouse on the east side of Mapogu. Yuna tugged the leash once, gently. Bomi didn't move. A low, sustained whine rose from the dog's throat, the kind Yuna had only heard once before, the night Bomi had found a child trapped under collapsed shelving at the Mangwon flea market. That sound meant something was alive that shouldn't be. Yuna crouched beside her. Rain plastered her hair against her jaw and ran in cold threads down the back of her neck. Past 11. Streets empty. The fluorescent buzz of the convenience store 2 blocks behind them was the only light still burning, and the alley ahead was black, not dark, black, the kind of darkness that felt arranged. "What is it, girl?" Bomi lunged, not playful. A wrenching, full-body pull that nearly tore the leash from Yuna's rain-slicked grip. The dog dragged her 3 steps into the alley before Yuna planted her feet, heart hammering. She should call someone. She should turn around. She should do every rational thing a woman walking a rescue dog alone at 11 at night in a deserted industrial pocket of Seoul should do. But the whine came again, desperate, almost human. Yuna pulled out her phone, turned on the flashlight, and followed the dog into the dark. The alley narrowed after 10 meters. Corrugated steel walls sweating with condensation. Broken concrete underfoot, standing water, the rusted skeleton of a bicycle frame she stepped over. Bomi moved with terrifying certainty, nose to the ground, pulling left at a junction Yuna hadn't seen, then right through a gap in chain-link fencing that someone had cut open weeks or months ago, the edges curled and soft with rust. Then the smell hit her. Not death, something adjacent, unwashed skin, stale urine, damp fabric left to rot. Yuna gagged and pressed her wrist against her nose. Bomi was pawing at the base of a wall where a corrugated panel had buckled inward, leaving a gap barely wide enough for a person to crawl through. Inside, darkness, and from inside the darkness, breathing. Thin, ragged, the kind that had almost given up. Yuna dropped to her knees and aimed the flashlight through the gap. A woman, on her side on filthy concrete, curled beneath what had once been a blanket and was now a damp rag. White hair, long, matted, covering most of her face. Wrists bound with zip ties, the plastic biting deep enough to draw blood that had dried in dark crusts along her forearms. Desperately, dangerously thin. The bones of her shoulders pressed against skin that looked paper white under the beam. The woman's eyes opened, glassy, unfocused, but alive. Yuna squeezed through the gap, tearing her jacket on jagged steel, and crawled to the woman's side. Up close, the bruising along her jaw, the infected cut above her left eyebrow, the grayish-blue fingers where the zip ties had strangled circulation. "I'm here," Yuna said, keeping her voice steady even as everything inside her was screaming. "I'm going to help you. Can you hear me? The woman's lips moved, a sound barely louder than rain on metal. Yi, one. What? Find. The woman's hand lifted, shaking, and gripped Yuna's wrist with a strength that seemed impossible given her condition. Her eyes found focus for one searing moment. Find Yiwon, my son. Tell him his mother is alive. Her eyes closed. Her grip went slack. Her breathing thinned to almost nothing. Yuna's hands shook as she dialed emergency services. She gave the location, cut the zip ties with the small utility blade she kept on her keychain for opening feed bags at the clinic, wrapped her jacket around the woman's shoulders, and waited in the dark with a dying stranger and a rescue dog who had just done the most extraordinary thing Yuna had ever witnessed. The ambulance came in 14 minutes. It felt like 14 hours. 3 days later, Yuna sat in the sterile quiet of a hospital corridor and watched the woman sleep through the glass partition. The doctors had stabilized her: severe dehydration, malnutrition, 2 fractured ribs, an infected laceration, early-stage pneumonia. Sedated now, hooked to an IV and a monitor that beeped in steady, reassuring intervals. The police had taken Yuna's statement, photographed the location, collected what evidence existed. They told her the woman had no identification. No phone, no wallet, nothing. But the woman had spoken twice more before the sedation, once in the ambulance, once in the emergency room. Both times, the same words. Kang Yiwon, my son, find him. Yuna searched the name at 3 in the morning, sitting on her apartment floor with Bomi asleep against her thigh and her laptop balanced on veterinary textbooks. The results told her everything she needed to know and nothing she wanted to hear. Kang Yiwon, 41, CEO of Hanul Capital, private equity holdings across construction, shipping, entertainment, and pharmaceuticals. Philanthropist, board member of 2 hospitals and a children's foundation. That was the surface. The version in press releases and gala photographs, a tall man in impeccable suits with a face that revealed nothing. Strong jaw, dark eyes, a stillness in his expression that photographers couldn't crack. Beneath the surface, Kang Yiwon was the head of the Hanulpa, the most powerful criminal syndicate in Seoul. His territory stretched from Gangnam to Incheon. His network included judges, prosecutors, police commissioners, and at least 2 sitting members of the National Assembly. People who crossed him disappeared. People who threatened what he loved were found in conditions that made the news use words like unprecedented. His mother, Kang Soon-hee, had been reported missing 3 months ago. The police investigation produced nothing. The media covered it for 2 weeks, then moved on. But the whispered economy of fear beneath Seoul's surface said Kang Yiwon had not moved on. He'd been dismantling the city piece by piece, quietly, methodically, burning through every contact, and lead with the patience of a man who understood that desperation was a luxury. 3 months, no ransom demand, no body, no word. And now Yuna, veterinary clinic assistant, 14 Pyong studio in Mangwon-dong, foster dog guardian, was watching his mother breathe. She had 2 choices: tell the police and let the system work, the system that had produced nothing in 3 months, the system that was partially owned by the man she needed to reach. Or go to him herself. Every self-preservation instinct screamed at her to walk away. But she kept seeing the woman's eyes in that moment of terrible clarity, kept feeling the grip on her wrist, kept hearing the raw desperation of a mother asking a stranger to find her son. Yuna stood, looked at the sleeping woman through the glass, made her decision. The Kang compound sat behind 12-foot walls on the northern slope of Buckhanson, where the city thinned into forest and the air smelled like pine. Yuna took the bus to the end of the line, then walked 20 minutes along a road that narrowed steadily, apartment blocks, giving way to walled estates and security cameras mounted on poles like steel flowers. Bomi trotted beside her, calm. The dog had better nerves. The gate appeared around a curve, black iron, 15 feet high, flanked by stone pillars and cameras that tracked Yuna's approach with mechanical precision. Beyond it, a paved driveway curved through manicured grounds toward a structure that was less a house than a fortress softened by architecture. Clean lines, dark stone, vast windows reflecting the overcast sky. Yuna pressed the intercom button. State your business. My name is Han Yuna. I need to speak with Kang Dohyun. It's about his mother. Silence, long enough that she thought the connection had been cut. Then, wait. 2 minutes, 3. A black SUV rolled down the driveway. 2 men emerged, tall, dark suits, the controlled stillness of people trained to neutralize threats. One approached the gate. His eyes moved over Yuna, the dog, the road behind her. Who sent you? No one. I found his mother 3 nights ago. She's alive. She's in the hospital. She told me to find her son. The man's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes, a flicker, there and gone. He pulled out a phone, spoke rapidly, listened. His jaw tightened. He spoke again, put the phone away. You'll be searched. Okay. The dog stays outside. The dog found his mother. The dog comes with me. Another pause, another phone call. The gate opened. They searched her thoroughly, bag, pockets, jacket lining, shoe soles. They ran a metal-detecting wand over Bomi, who endured it with the dignity of a dog who had survived worse. Then the SUV, up the curving driveway in leather-scented silence. The house was larger inside than it appeared. The entryway could have held her apartment. Marble floors, minimal furniture. The kind of emptiness that communicated not poverty but authority, every object present by choice, every absent object absent by the same. The air smelled faintly of cedar and something clean and metallic. They led her through a corridor lined with windows overlooking a courtyard where a single maple tree stood in white gravel, its bare winter branches reaching upward. At the end, a door. The guard knocked once, opened it, stepped aside. The study, bookshelves on 2 walls. A black wood desk, massive, bare except for a laptop and a single document. And behind the desk, standing with his back to the door, face turned toward the window, Kang Dohyun. Photographs didn't capture him. They showed the structure, height, shoulder breadth, the sharp architecture of his face. They missed the quality that filled the room like a change in atmospheric pressure. He was still, not relaxed. Still the way a loaded weapon is still, everything contained, everything ready, the surface revealing nothing about the mechanism beneath. He turned. His eyes found hers and held. Dark brown, nearly black, reading her the way a surgeon reads an X-ray layer by layer, through skin and muscle to the bone beneath. Sit, he said. Low, not deep, not theatrical. The voice of a man who never raised it because the world leaned in to listen. Eunice sat. Bomi settled at her feet. The guards withdrew. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a lock engaging. 2 men remained in the room, one standing by the bookshelf with a tablet in his hands, silver-haired, early 50s, watching Yuna with eyes that calculated her value by the second. The other stood near the window, younger, built like a boxer beneath his tailored suit, his posture communicating a readiness for violence that seemed perpetual. Kang Dohyun didn't introduce them. In this world, names were given when earned, not when met. You said you found my mother. 3 nights ago, an abandoned printing warehouse in Mapogu. My dog led me to her. Describe what you found. She described it. All of it, the alley, the steel gap, the smell, the zip ties, the injuries, the words. Clinical, precise, without embellishment. She watched his face and saw nothing change. He listened the way a blade listens to the whetstone, absorbing everything, sharpening. When she finished, the silence stretched. 10 seconds, 20. The silver-haired man had stopped looking at his tablet. The one by the window had gone completely still. Which hospital? Severance, room 614. Stable but critical. Pneumonia, fractured ribs, severe malnutrition. She was held for a long time. 3 months. The doctors confirmed it. His hand tightened on the back of the chair. The tendons rose for a moment, then smoothed. That was all. That single contraction contained more than an hour of weeping. Why did you come here? He asked. Your mother asked me to. You could have called the police. The police had 3 months. His eyes narrowed. Not suspicion, recalibration. She had surprised him. She understood instinctively that surprising this man was rare and possibly dangerous. Who do you work for? Hana Veterinary Clinic in Mangwondong. I'm a vet assistant. Who else knows you're here? No one. You came to the home of a man you've never met, alone, with no one knowing where you are, to deliver information about his missing mother. Yes. Why? She thought about lying, about constructing something noble about civic duty, but his eyes would see through anything less than truth. Because she grabbed my wrist in the dark and asked me to find you, and I couldn't say no to that. Something shifted, not air, not light, a recalibration of the space between them, as though she had passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. He studied her for a moment longer, then pulled his phone from his jacket. Room 614, Severance Hospital, full security within the hour. No one enters without my authorization. Pause. Now, he looked at the silver-haired man. Director CO, coordinate the detail personally. The silver-haired man nodded and left. Second call. Prepare the car, hospital. His eyes moved to Yuna. The woman who brought the information will be escorted home safely. He looked at the man by the window. Hyun-sik, handle it yourself. The man by the window, Hyun-sik, looked at Yuna, then at Kang, then nodded with the kind of deference that comes from years of proximity and trust. Kang ended the call and looked at her. You'll be taken home. A security detail will be stationed outside your building. I don't need. Whoever took my mother held her for 3 months without a demand. It wasn't about money. It was about me. They chose that location. They may have watched it. If they saw you enter, they know your face. He said it without heat, informing her of reality. This is not a request. Okay. He walked past her toward the door, paused. She felt his proximity, the warmth, the faint cedar, the sheer physical density. He looked down at Bomi, who looked up at him with her tongue lolling and her tail sweeping the marble. This is the dog. Her name is Bomi. He crouched, slowly controlled, a man who made even lowering himself look deliberate. He held out his hand. Bomi sniffed it, then pressed her head into his palm. Something crossed his face. Brief, private. A fissure in deep water, letting light through for one moment before the surface sealed again. Thank you, he said. He was looking at the dog, but Yuna knew the words were for her. Then he stood, opened the door, and was gone. Yuna thought that was the end of it. Security for a few days, then the Kang family's world would close around its recovered matriarch, and she'd return to vaccine schedules and flea treatments. She was wrong. The call came at 6 the next morning. Secretary Choi, clipped, professional, female. Mr. Kang's mother is asking for you. Within the hour, Yuna was on the 6th floor. It had transformed overnight. Suits flanked the elevator. Another at the nurse's station. A fourth outside room 614, posture declaring the space beyond off-limits. Inside, warmth, light, white peonies on the bedside table. The medical equipment was the same, but the bedding had been changed and a standing lamp cast a gentler glow. Kang Soon-hee was awake, gaunt, bruised, bandaged, but her eyes were alert, clear, present. They found Yuna immediately and filled with something that tightened Yuna's chest. There she is, the old woman whispered. The girl with the brave little dog. Yuna sat beside the bed. Up close, she saw the resemblance, the same bone structure, the same dark eyes. But where the sun was deep water, the mother was open sky. Everything moved. Everything showed. How are you feeling? Alive, because of you. Because of Bomi. Soon-hee's lips curved. Then I owe a debt to a dog. My son will hate that. She took Yuna's hand, weak grip but warm. He told me what you did, coming to the compound. Alone. Do you know what kind of place you walked into? I'm starting to understand. No, you're not, but you will. Her eyes searched Yuna's face. He said you didn't negotiate, didn't ask for anything, just delivered the truth and expected to go home. That's all I came to do. And that is exactly why he hasn't stopped thinking about you. Yuna's heart did something complicated. I'm sure he has more important concerns. He does, that's what makes it remarkable. Soon he squeezed her hand. I was dying in that place, not just my body, my hope. 3 months in the dark. I kept telling myself someone would come. and someone did. Yuna blinked against the burning behind her eyes. Can you tell me who took you? The warmth in Soon-hee's face banked like a fire covered for the night. The men wore masks. They spoke Korean, but I heard Mandarin once. They thought I was asleep. The one in charge never showed his face, but he had a scar on his left hand, between the thumb and forefinger. Not a knife scar. A chemical burn, perfectly round. The kind someone gives you to make a point. Your son is looking for them. My son found them weeks ago. What he's doing now is deciding what finding them means. Come back, Soon-hee said as Yuna rose to leave. Please, the flowers are lovely, but they don't talk back. Yuna was almost at the door when it opened from outside. Kang Yi-won stood in the frame. Close enough to see the faint shadow beneath his eyes. Close enough to notice the precise knot of his tie and the way fabric sat across his shoulders without a crease. He looked down at her with something between assessment and something warmer, held behind glass. Miss Han. Mr. Kang. You came quickly. Your mother asked. That Fisher again, there and gone. She's good at that. He stepped aside. As she passed, his hand moved not to touch her, but to the small of her back, hovering a centimeter from contact, guiding without connecting. A gesture so controlled it communicated more than any touch could have. Yuna walked out with her pulse elevated, and something she couldn't name sitting beneath her ribs. She went back the next day, and the day after. It started as duty. It became something else quickly. Soon he was warm and sharp and funny in the way only women who have survived terrible things can be. She asked about Yuna's work, her life, her family. Yuna told her about the clinic, about Dr. Park, about the anxious Pomeranians and stoic Jindos and cats who regarded her with feline contempt. About finding Bomi abandoned in a parking garage 2 years ago. About her parents, father who drove a delivery truck, mother who ran an alteration shop in Mapo, her brother in Busan. Soon he told her about the son, how he'd been a quiet child who built elaborate structures from wooden blocks and dismantled them in perfect reverse order. How he'd read every book in the neighborhood library by 14. How he brought her white peonies on her birthday, even during the chaos years. Kang Yi-won appeared each evening at 7, precise as a struck bell. 1 hour. Low tones with his mother, chart review with the doctor, conference with the detailed departure. He was never alone. The silver-haired man from the study, Director Seo, accompanied him twice. Hyun-sik, the one built like a boxer, stood outside the door. And once, a third man appeared, older than the others, with a face carved by decades of discipline, who greeted Soon-hee with a formal bow that carried genuine affection, and whom she called T-sung, with the casual warmth of long familiarity. Uncle T-sung, she told Yuna after the man left. Not really my brother, but he might as well be. He's been with this family since before Yi-won was born. My husband's closest friend, the only person alive who calls my son by his childhood nickname. She paused. The only person Yi-won trusts completely. On the third day, a thermos of loose-leaf tea appeared at the nurse's station with Yuna's name. The kind from in Sadong shops she couldn't afford. No one claimed it. On the fourth day, something changed. Yuna was leaving when the elevator doors opened on a man she'd never seen. Tall, thin, elegant in a way that suggested European tailoring. His smile used all the right muscles without reaching his eyes. Behind him, 2 men who were not hospital staff and not Kang's security. Kang's men were controlled and anonymous. These men wanted to be seen. The thin man's eyes tracked to Yuna's visitor badge, to the room number. His smile widened. Room 614, visiting Mrs. Kang. Yuna said nothing. Liang Wei, old business associate of her son's, I heard she was recovering. He tilted his head. His left hand rested on the elevator frame, and Yuna saw it between the thumb and forefinger, a scar, perfectly round, a chemical burn. The scar Soon-hee had described. Yuna's blood went cold. She was standing 2 feet from the man who had chained a 68-year-old woman to a pipe and left her to starve for 3 months. He was smiling at her. He was asking her name. And you are? Leaving, Yuna said. She stepped past him, hit the ground floor button, and kept her breathing even until the doors closed on his smile. She called the security team before she reached the lobby. Within 5 minutes, she was in a black car being driven to the compound. Same study, different atmosphere. Tension filled the room like gas waiting for a spark. 4 of Kang's men lined the walls, Hyun-sik at the window, Director Seo at the desk with his laptop, and 2 others. Behind the desk, Kang Yi-won sat with a stillness that preceded something definitive. His eyes were darker than she'd ever seen them. Describe him. No greeting. His voice carried something new beneath it, a wire pulled past its tolerance. She described everything. Height, build, clothing, accent, the 2 men, the name he'd given. The smile. Then she said, he had a scar on his left hand, between the thumb and forefinger. Round, a burn. The room changed. Director Seo looked up sharply. Hyun-sik shifted his weight. 2 of the guards adjusted their stances. Kang Yi-won went absolutely still. Not his usual stillness, something beyond it. A system shutting down non-essential functions to redirect everything to a single process. You're certain, he said, not a question. Your mother described that scar to me yesterday. She said the man in charge had it. A chemical burn, he's the one. Not just his organization, him. Silence, volcanic. Liang Wei, Director Seo said. Formerly Guiyang Syndicate. Incheon operations. Shipping. We flagged his organization 6 weeks ago in connection with the Mapo warehouse district. He saw her badge, Kang said. Yes, sir. The room number. Yes, sir. And he spoke to her. This last sentence carried something that made every man in the room straighten. Not anger, something colder, something with architecture. Move my mother tonight. Private wing, Asan Medical, full lockdown. He looked at Yuna. You're not going home. Excuse me. He knows your face, the room, and the building. By tomorrow he'll know your name, address, and schedule. You're no longer safe. I can't just. Your dog will be collected. Essentials packed. You'll stay in the guest quarters until the threat is resolved. Mr. Kang, I have a job, a life. He stood, unhurried, but it silenced her the way a conductor's baton silences an orchestra, completely, through authority. He walked around the desk and stopped in front of her. Close. She could see the grain of his suit, a faint scar along his jaw, the absolute focus of his eyes. 3 months ago, men took my mother from a market in daylight. They held her in concrete and let her starve. I searched every day. I turned this city inside out, and I failed. His voice didn't waver, didn't rise. Low, controlled, precise. But beneath the precision, she heard something she hadn't heard before. Not rage. Weight. The kind carried by a man who considered his failure a sin. You succeeded where I failed. You found her. You brought her back to me. And now you've given me the one piece of information my entire organization couldn't produce in 3 months. The identity of the man who took her. He held her gaze. I will not let him touch you. Not while there is breath in my body. This is not negotiable. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Bomi adapted to the compound, faster than Yuna did. The guest quarters overlooked the courtyard maple. Wide bed. Walk-in shower. A window seat Bomi immediately claimed. Yuna's belongings arrived within 2 hours, packed with clinical efficiency by someone who had inventoried her apartment with professional thoroughness. On the second morning, Yuna was crossing the courtyard when a woman stepped into her path. Mid-30s. Severe haircut. The kind of posture that communicated competence and skepticism in equal measure. You're the girl with the dog. Han Yuna. I know who you are. I ran your background check. The woman didn't smile. Park Minjai, head of internal security, 11 years with the Kang family. It's nice to meet you. Is it? Minjai studied her the way a jeweler studies a stone, looking for the flaw. In 11 years, no one has entered this compound without an appointment, a background file, and a reason vetted by 3 levels of our organization. You walked up to the gate with a dog. I had a good reason. Everyone who walks through that gate thinks they have a good reason. Most of them are right. Some of them are carrying a wire. She paused. I don't think you're carrying a wire, but I don't think you understand what you've walked into. I've watched well-intentioned people become liabilities because they didn't understand the weight of this world until it was sitting on their chest. I'm not a liability. Not yet, but this family inspires loyalty that overrides judgment. People who care about the Kangs make sacrifices they haven't calculated the cost of. I want to make sure you've done the math. Yuna met her eyes. I found a woman dying in a warehouse. I cut her free. I brought her son the information that could save her. If doing the right thing makes me a liability, then your math is wrong. Minjai held the look for a long beat. Then a recalculation, grudging, precise, the acknowledgement that the equation was more complex than she'd assumed. I eat breakfast at 7. If you want to understand how this world actually works, you're welcome to join me. She walked away without waiting for an answer. Yuna ate breakfast at 7 the next morning, and the morning after that. Minjai educated her, carefully, precisely, the way a guide teaches terrain that can kill. She explained the organizational structure without naming names. She taught Yuna to notice surveillance, to vary her routine, to understand that predictability was vulnerability. On the 4th morning, over rice and dried pollock soup, Minjai said something that stayed with Yuna. You want to know what surprised me about your background check? I didn't know I had one. Everyone who enters this compound gets one. Yours came back clean, unremarkable, no debt, no record, no affiliations. Nothing that explains why you crawled through a hole in a wall at 11 at night. Minjai set down her chopsticks. That's what surprised me. There's nothing in your file that accounts for who you actually are. Maybe a file can't capture that. Maybe, or maybe you haven't been tested until now. Yuna thought about that often during her first week. The compound operated with the precision of a surgical theater, staff in quiet patterns, meals at exact times, grounds impeccable. Everything functioned with silent efficiency. But beneath the order, Yuna sensed the tension. Phone calls dropping to whispers when she entered a room. Guards tracking her with professional courtesy that didn't hide their uncertainty. The compound wasn't at peace. It was in preparation. She called Dr. Park and took indefinite leave. She called her mother and kept her voice light. Her mother said, "Be careful, Yunia," in the tone that meant she knew something was wrong and trusted her daughter. She walked the grounds with Bomi. The garden at the back wound through pruned shrubs and a pond inhabited by koi the color of sunset. She could go anywhere inside the walls. She could not leave them. The distinction was polite and absolute. On the 5th evening, she passed an open door and heard voices from inside, Kang Yiwon and Uncle Tisung, the old family friend Soon-hee had mentioned. Tisung's voice was graveled with age and authority. The CO team has mapped Liang Wei's financial network, accounts in 3 countries, but there's something that doesn't add up, the Mapo warehouse lease. It was paid through a domestic shell company, not through Liang Wei's foreign channels. Someone local set up the holding location. Someone who knows the city, Kang said. Someone who knows your mother's routine, Tisung replied. Silence, the kind that felt heavy with implications Yuna couldn't yet see. She moved on, her skin prickling. A week into her stay, Yuna couldn't sleep. She pulled on a sweater and walked to the kitchen for water. He was there. Kang Yiwon sat at the kitchen island with a glass of something amber and a document he read with the intensity of a man diffusing ordnance. Jacket off, sleeves rolled, and for the first time, she saw the tattoos. They started at his wrists and climbed, intricate, dark, dense with dragons and waves, and something geometric threading between them like a language written on skin. They disappeared beneath the rolled cuffs, and she knew they continued across his chest, his shoulders, his back. A cartography of power and commitment made permanent in ink. He looked up, registered her, sweater over pajamas, bare feet, the unguarded honesty of a woman caught between wakefulness and sleep. Couldn't sleep. No. Water's in the fridge, glasses right of the sink. She got her water, should have left, sat across from him instead. How is your mother? Improving. She asked if you were comfortable and whether the dog had destroyed anything yet. Bomi is very well behaved. She chewed through a security cable this afternoon. I'll pay for that. It cost 300,000 won. I'll pay for that, slowly. His mouth moved. Not a smile, the architecture of his face seemed to resist it, but the corners shifted a millimeter. You won't pay for anything. I'm not comfortable with that. I know. Is that why you keep doing it? The tea, the book. What book? The novel I mentioned to your mother, the first edition that appeared in my room. Quiet, then. You told my mother you'd read it 3 times. I had my assistant locate the edition. That's a very attentive thing for someone I've known a week. Can I ask you something? She said. You can ask. When you got to the hospital that first night, when you saw her. His jaw tightened, a single contraction. You don't have to answer. I know I don't. Quiet for a moment. Then, I stood outside the room for 4 minutes before I went in. I have walked into rooms where men held guns. I have sat across from people who wanted me dead and discussed terms without raising my pulse. Standing outside that hospital room, knowing she was alive, knowing I was about to see what they'd done to her. He stopped, drew a breath. That was the hardest door I've ever opened. She's strong, stronger than she looks. She's the strongest person I've ever known. She held this family together after my father died with nothing but stubbornness and grace. She raised me in a world that devours children. He looked at the amber in his glass. When she disappeared, I didn't sleep for 11 days. Not because I was working, although I was, every hour. Because every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, and the uncertainty was worse than any answer would have been. 11 days. My chief of staff forced me to sleep on the 12th. Quite literally, he had the doctor sedate me. The millimeter shift again. I fired him when I woke up. He refused to leave. He's been with me for 19 years. He knows he's unfireable. Eunice smiled despite the weight. You have people who care about you. I have people who are loyal. That's not the same thing. She studied him. The kitchen was dim, just the light above the stove. And in that low warmth, she could see the exhaustion written in his jaw, the accumulated weight of being the man everyone feared and no one held. Loyalty isn't the same as warmth, she said quietly, but it doesn't have to be the opposite either. He looked at her. She felt the room contract, not threatening, not the contraction of a closing space, but the gathering of something between them that had been diffuse and was becoming specific. His eyes moved to her hands wrapped around the water glass. She realized, without understanding how she knew, that he was looking at the way she held things. Gently, with all her fingers, the way she probably held injured animals at the clinic. He was watching the kindness in her hands. He looked away first. A deliberate withdrawal, set down his glass and stood. You should sleep, he said. His voice was controlled. His hand, gathering the document from the counter, was not entirely steady. You should too. She walked to the door, stopped. Thank you for the book. It's my favorite. I know, that's why I found it. She went. Behind her, in the dim kitchen, Kang Dohyun stood absolutely still for a very long time. On the 9th day, soon he called Yuna to the hospital. Not for company. She was sitting up with a clarity in her eyes that felt different, harder, more focused. She waited until Yuna sat, then took her hand. I need to tell you something that isn't warm and isn't kind, because you deserve to hear it from someone who loves you rather than learn it from the world. Yuna's stomach tightened. Okay. My husband built the Hanalpa. He was brilliant and ruthless, and he loved me more than his own life. He was also the reason I spent 30 years sleeping with one eye open. The reason I raised my son alone for weeks while his father handled things I was not allowed to know about. The reason I learned to read a room for threats before I looked for the exit. She paused. He died in this life, Yuna, not of old age, not in his sleep. I know. You know the fact. You don't know the feel. The phone call at 3 in the morning. The sound your own voice makes when you understand what the words mean. The way the world splits into before and after, and you live in the after forever. Yuna's throat ached. My son is not his father. He's smarter, more controlled. But the world is the same world. The dangers are the same. If you stay, and I hope you stay, child, I hope it with everything in me, you need to understand that there will be nights you don't sleep. calls you dread, decisions he makes that you cannot influence and may not agree with. You need to decide now with clear eyes whether you can carry that, not because you're weak if you can't, because you're wise if you know your limits. Yuna sat with it. She didn't rush to answer, because the woman who had survived 91 days in the dark deserved more than a reflex. I watched you survive something that would have killed most people, Yuna said. And the first thing you did when you could speak was ask a stranger to find your son. You didn't ask to be saved. You asked for him to know you were alive. She held Soon-hee's hand tighter. I'm not naive about what this is, but I'm not willing to walk away from it either. Soon-hee's eyes glistened. She nodded once. Then, good, now bring me my apple, and peel it properly. Last time you left half the flesh on the skin. The escalation came 3 days later. Not at the compound, not at the hospital. At the veterinary rehabilitation facility where Yuna had begun working, a connection arranged through Kang's hospital board. She was in the recovery ward, monitoring a sedated Jindo with a shattered pelvis, when a staff member knocked with a delivery box. Someone left this at reception. Your name's on it. Inside, a dog collar. Small. Pink. The exact collar Bomi had been wearing the night Yuna found Soon-hee. The one she'd replaced 2 weeks ago because the clasp was broken. Beneath the collar, a handwritten note in precise, unhurried script. I know the dog. I know the girl. I know the gate she walks through every morning. Consider whether the old woman was worth it. No signature. The chemical burn scar was implied in every word. Yuna's hands were steady when she called security. Steady when the team arrived and bagged the collar. Steady when she got in the car. They were not steady when she reached the study. Kang Yi-won read the note. His face didn't change. But the room's temperature seemed to drop, a physical sensation, as though the man behind the desk was absorbing heat and converting it to something else entirely. He's tracking me, Yuna said. He was tracking you. He won't be again. How can you be sure? Because after tonight, his ability to track anything will be significantly diminished. He set the note down, walked to her, stopped close enough that she could feel the cold radiating from him, not physical cold, the cold of a man channeling fury into something precise and architectural. He sent this to split my focus between finding him and protecting you. He doesn't understand that I can do both. His hand rose to her face, fingers against her jaw. The touch was warm despite everything, careful, specific, the hands of a man who understood that gentleness required more strength than violence. You are going to keep being exactly who you are, he said. You are going to work, visit my mother, walk in the garden. You are going to live your life inside these walls as if the world outside doesn't exist, because it won't, not for much longer. And if I said I wanted to help, practically, not just emotionally, I'm observant. I notice the scar. I'm trained to read what animals won't show you. People aren't different. Something flickered behind his eyes, not dismissal, consideration. I'll think about it. That night, Yuna lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Bomi pressed against her side, breathing in the slow rhythm of an animal who trusted its environment completely. The collar sat in an evidence bag somewhere, but she could still feel its weight. The familiar pink nylon returned as a promise of violence. She was afraid. She named it honestly, the way Soon-hee had taught her, numbing the fear without letting it name her. Afraid because a man who tortured an old woman for 91 days now knew her face. Afraid because the man she was falling for operated in a world where people were pieces on a board. Afraid because she couldn't solve this problem with competence and kindness and hard work. This required something darker, something she didn't possess. But beneath the fear, resolve. The same resolve that carried her through the wall, through the gate, into the chair across from the most dangerous man in Seoul. She was afraid, and she was staying. She fell asleep with her hand on Bomi's warm side and woke to vehicles leaving the compound before dawn. The dismantling of Liang Wei's empire took 11 days. Yuna observed it the way a civilian observes a war, from a protected distance, catching fragments. Vehicles at all hours. Secretary Choi moving through corridors like a general's aide. Director Seo in constant conference with teams she never saw, his silver hair and sharp eyes appearing and vanishing through doorways at unpredictable intervals, always with his tablet, always calculating. Hyun-sik appearing and disappearing at hours that suggested he hadn't slept in days, his boxer's frame somehow more coiled with each passing night. And Uncle Tae-sung, the old family friend, who moved through the compound with the quiet authority of a man who had managed crises in this family for 40 years, whose presence seemed to stabilize every room he entered. Tae-sung was the one who fascinated Yuna most. He carried himself with the stillness of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing, and the staff treated him with a deference that went beyond respect into something closer to reverence. He had known Kang Dohyun since birth, had been at the father's side when the empire was nothing but ambition and risk, had survived the transition of power when the father died and the 17-year-old son took the helm. He was, by every measure, the most trusted person in the Kang organization. He nodded to Yuna once in the corridor on day 3. "You're the one with the dog," he said. "Good dog," and kept walking. It was the most words she'd heard him speak. But she noticed, in the brief moment their eyes met, something she couldn't name, not hostility, not warmth, but a watchfulness that felt like being weighed on a scale she couldn't see. On day 4, she ate breakfast with Min-jae and asked, "How bad is it?" Min-jae set down her coffee. Liang Wei's shipping routes through Incheon were seized by customs. Financial accounts in 4 countries frozen. 14 members arrested on charges prepared by our legal team. 4 countries, I thought it was 3. Min-jae paused. "You've been paying attention. You told me predictability is vulnerability. I assumed the same applies to assumptions." "It does. Our forensic accountants found a 4th, Myanmar. He was funneling payments through a construction company in Mandalay." On day 6, Yuna passed the courtyard and saw Tae-sung and Hyun-sik standing together by the maple tree. They weren't speaking. They were standing in the particular silence of 2 people who had just finished a conversation they didn't want overheard. When they noticed her, Tae-sung smiled, warm, avuncular, the smile of a man who had spent decades making people feel at ease. Hyun-sik didn't smile. He nodded and walked away. It was probably nothing. People in high-pressure environments had private conversations constantly. But Yuna's training, the training that read pain in creatures who hid it, registered the moment and filed it. Not as suspicion, just as observation. The kind of observation that, in her experience, sometimes mattered later. On day 8, Yuna found something. She was in the library, Bomi dozing beside her, going through news archives on her laptop. Not because anyone asked, because she couldn't be passive, couldn't be the woman who waited while the war happened outside. She'd been researching Liang Wei's known associates, cross-referencing public shipping records from Incheon with the dates of Soon-hee's captivity. She wasn't trained for intelligence work. She was trained to observe animals, to notice when something was wrong before the animal could tell her, to read the subtle signs of pain in creatures who hid both as survival instinct. People, she was learning, weren't so different. The pattern was in the shipping manifests, publicly available records from the Port Authority's database. 3 vessels registered to a subsidiary of Liang Wei's network had docked at Incheon on dates corresponding to key events. One the day Soon-hee was taken, one the day the ransom demand was intercepted, and one, this was the one that made her hands go cold, 2 days from now. She brought it to Min-jae first, because Min-jae would tell her honestly whether she was seeing something real or constructing patterns from anxiety. Min-jae looked at the data for 90 seconds, then picked up her phone. "Get me the boss, now." 20 minutes later, Yuna sat in the study while Kang Dohyun and his intelligence chief reviewed her findings. The flagged vessel, the Halong, registered in Panama, operated by a shell company traced to Liang Wei's Myanmar accounts, was scheduled to arrive at Incheon in 48 hours. Cargo manifest listed industrial equipment. The actual cargo, cracked within 3 hours. Documents, hard drives, and financial records Liang Wei was extracting before Kang's dismantling reached them. "If that ship docks and offloads," the intelligence chief said, "he preserves his records. He rebuilds, maybe not here but somewhere. This stops being a destruction and becomes a setback." "And if it doesn't dock?" Everything stays on that ship, and we take it. Kang Dohyun looked at Yuna. The room was full of men who had spent their careers in the shadow world, and the critical intelligence break had come from a veterinary assistant reading shipping manifests in a library. How did you find this? Animals hide their pain. Its evolutionary showing weakness invites predators, so you learn to look for what they don't show you, the patterns in what's missing. She met his eyes. 3 ships, 3 key dates, a 4th ship scheduled. It was what wasn't in the data that told me something was wrong. What wasn't in the data? The intelligence chief asked. Return voyages. The first 3 ships came in and left empty. No outgoing cargo logged. Ships don't run empty, it's not economical, unless the cargo isn't on the manifest. Kang leaned back. His eyes held hers, and in them she saw something new, not just respect, not just attraction, but the recognition of a man who had surrounded himself with trained operatives and watched a woman with no training see what all of them had missed. Minjai, he said, without looking away from Yuna. Sir. Promote her clearance. The Halong never docked. Customs intercepted it 12 nautical miles off the Incheon coast, acting on an anonymous tip supported by documentation so thorough that the warrant was issued within hours. The ship carried exactly what the intelligence team predicted: servers, hard drives, encrypted financial records, and physical documents linking Liang Wei's network to operations in 6 countries. The seizure made the news. The anonymous tip was never traced. The morning after, Minjai found Yuna in the library. I owe you an apology. For what? For underestimating you. I've spent my career with intelligence professionals, training, clearances, decades of experience. You found something in public shipping records that none of them found in classified databases. The admission cost her something. I told you on day when you might become a liability. I was wrong. You're an asset. I just looked at what was missing. That's what the best analysts do. The rest of us were looking at what was there. Minjai stood. Breakfast tomorrow. 7. Also, your dog ate my security briefing this morning. The classified one. I'm choosing to interpret that as good taste. For the first time in 11 days, Yuna laughed. Liang Wei's organization ceased to exist as a functional entity on day 11. On day 12, Kang Dohyun found her in the garden. Late afternoon. Spring light golden, filtering through the maple's new leaves. Bomi investigating the koi pond with the determination of a dog who believed she could catch a fish. He stood beside her at the pond's edge, quiet for a long time. Liang Wei left the country this morning. Japan. He won't be returning. How can you know? The terms were communicated by men standing in his hotel room at 4 in the morning. Evidence in the hands of 5 law enforcement agencies ensures that returning means immediate arrest. And the others. Minjai told me your mother wasn't the only one. 3 others, all recovered, all receiving anonymous medical care through our foundation. He paused. Because of what you found. The shipping records led to the Myanmar accounts, which led to the holding locations. Without your work, we'd have dismantled his finances but never found them. Yuna stared at the koi. Gold and white shapes in dark water, beautiful and oblivious. You saved 4 people, he said. 5, including my mother, with a dog and a laptop and the same instinct that made you crawl through a hole in a wall. Don't make me into something I'm not. I'm not. I'm telling you what you are. She looked at him. He was watching the water, his profile sharp against golden light, and she saw him differently, not the deep water, not the blade, but the man beneath both. Tired, relieved, carrying the weight of someone who has just finished dismantling something terrible and is standing in the debris wondering what comes next. What do you need? She asked. He turned. The light caught his eyes, and for the first time she saw them fully open, every wall down, every defense lowered. Someone who stays, who doesn't have to. She closed the distance, put her hand on his chest. Beneath fabric, warmth, heartbeat, the edges of tattoos she'd been imagining. He went still, holding the moment with the full weight of his attention. I don't have to be here, she said. No. I'm here. His hand closed around her wrist. Gently, the opposite of the grip his mother used in that warehouse. He lifted her hand and pressed his mouth to her palm, eyes closed, a gesture so private it felt sacred. When he opened his eyes, the water was clear. Stay, he said, not a directive, a request, the only one she'd ever heard him make. I'm staying. The days that followed were not a fairy tale. Yuna knew better than to expect one, and Kang Yi-won did not deal in fantasies. What they built was more durable and more honest. A life inside a world that operated by rules most people would never understand, held together by the daily choice to be present. Yuna continued at the rehabilitation facility. She traveled with a driver and security she'd stopped noticing. She ate breakfast with Minjai 3 mornings a week and learned the grammar of this world. She visited Soon-hee at a San Medical, where the old woman was recovering with the aggressive vitality of someone who intended to enjoy every reclaimed moment. She spoke to her parents, carefully in stages. Her father asked, "Is he good to you? And does he respect your work?" Yes to both. Her mother asked, "Are you safe?" And Yuna said, "I am the safest I have ever been." It was true. Not the fragile safety of locks and alarms, but the bone-deep safety of knowing that the most dangerous man in Seoul had made her welfare his mandate. He didn't hover, didn't suffocate. He arranged the world so harm couldn't reach her, and then trusted her to live in it. Their relationship deepened in quiet spaces. Late-night conversations in the kitchen that started as silence and expanded into intimacy. Mornings when she woke early enough to catch him before he left, and he paused at the door to press his lips to her forehead. Evenings when he came home and found her, wherever she was, and stood in her presence for a moment, just breathing, before his world reasserted itself. There were moments that revealed him in ways his words never would. One afternoon, she came home from the facility to find him in the courtyard with Bomi. Jacket off, tie loosened, Bomi's head resting on his thigh. He was reading to the dog. Not baby talk, a financial report, his low voice steady and serious, and Bomi was gazing up at him with the adoring focus of an animal who had decided this human was hers. He didn't know Yuna was watching. For 30 seconds, she saw him without the awareness of observation, and what she saw was a man who was profoundly lonely, and a creature who didn't care about his power or his name, and the miracle of the two finding each other. He looked up, saw her. Something crossed his face, the rawness of being caught unguarded. She said nothing, just sat beside him on the bench and leaned her shoulder against his arm and let the silence hold all 3 of them. One night in the garden, standing by the koi pond under a cleared sky, she asked about his father. He told her not everything, some rooms stayed closed and she respected the locks. But enough. The father who built the empire from nothing and died when Yi-won was 17. Learning at 17 to command men twice his age, to read loyalty and betrayal in the same handshake, to make decisions that determined whether people lived or died, and then sleep afterward. The loneliness that lived inside power, because the man at the top of any structure is, by definition, the most isolated person in it. Your mother warned me, Yuna said, about what this life costs. She's right to warn you. She said your father died from the weight, the loneliness. He was quiet for a long time. My father never had someone who stayed because they chose to. My mother stayed because she loved him, but she also stayed because leaving would have been impossible by the time she understood the full picture. That's not the same as choosing, and my father knew it. The knowledge ate at him. And you. I decided a long time ago that I would never ask someone to carry what my mother carried, that I would carry it alone, because alone was honest and honest was all I could offer. He turned to look at her. And then you knocked on my gate. And your plan went to hell. The corners of his mouth shifted, that millimeter, completely. Then, on day 15, the cost arrived. Yuna woke at 2 in the morning to footsteps in the corridor, not the measured rhythm of guards rotating shifts, but something urgent, contained, moving fast. She pulled on her sweater and opened her door. Hyun-sik was in the hallway, blood on his shirt. Not his, the pattern was wrong, spattered rather than soaked, meaning he'd been standing near someone else when the bleeding happened. He saw Yuna and shook his head once. Go back inside. She didn't. She followed the sounds downstairs to the study, where the door was open and the room was full of people, and the particular kind of controlled chaos that meant something had gone very wrong. Kang Yi-won was standing behind his desk. His suit jacket was gone. His white shirt had blood on the left sleeve, someone else's, the same spatter pattern as Hyun-sik's. His face was exactly as she had always seen it, controlled, precise, revealing nothing. On the couch against the far wall, Director Seo sat with a compress pressed to a wound on his upper arm. A medic was working on him with efficient hands. Seo's face was white, but his eyes were sharp, and when he saw Yuna in the doorway, he said, flatly, "It's not serious." "What happened?" Yuna said. No one answered. The room was waiting for Kang to speak. "An associate of Liang Wei's attempted retaliation," Kang said. A final act before his network collapsed completely. Director Seo intercepted the attempt. The associate has been detained. "Detained," Yuna repeated. The word sat in the room with a weight that went beyond its dictionary definition. Detained. She looked at the blood on his sleeve, at the compress on Seo's arm, at Hyun-sik's spattered shirt, at the faces of the men in the room, calm, professional, operating inside a reality where this was Tuesday. "What happens to him?" she asked. "The man who was detained." The room went quiet. Not the productive quiet of people thinking, but the cautious quiet of people waiting to see which version of the truth would be offered. Kang Yi-won looked at her. His eyes were steady. "He will be delivered to the authorities with evidence sufficient for prosecution." "And if there wasn't sufficient evidence, if it was your word against his?" He held her gaze. The silence was answer enough. Yuna felt the ground shift beneath her. Not the metaphorical shift of understanding something new, a physical sensation, the feeling of standing on something she had believed was solid and discovering that it moved. She understood in that moment what soon he had been warning her about. Not the danger, not the violence, the decisions. The ones made in rooms like this, at 2 a.m, with blood on someone's sleeve, and a man's fate being determined by a calculus she had no part in and no power over. "I need some air," she said. She walked to the garden. The night was cold and clear, and the koi were invisible beneath the dark surface of the pond. She stood there for a long time, breathing, feeling the weight of what she'd just witnessed settle into her understanding of this world. Bomi found her first. The dog appeared from the direction of the kitchen, having presumably escaped through a door left open in the commotion, and pressed against Yuna's leg with the insistent warmth of a creature who knew when its person needed contact. Then footsteps, measured, deliberate. He stopped 3 feet behind her. "You're angry," he said. "I'm not angry. I'm recalibrating." "Tell me." She turned. He was standing in the moonlight with blood still on his sleeve, and his face still controlled and his eyes still steady. And she loved him, and she was frightened by the world he lived in, and both things were true at the same time. "Your mother told me there would be decisions I couldn't influence and might not agree with. I understood it intellectually. I didn't understand what it felt like to stand in a room and hear the word detained, and know it might mean something other than what it means in the world I come from." "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to tell me the truth, not the version you think I can handle. The truth." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "The man who attacked tonight was carrying a weapon intended for my mother's hospital room. He was not going to negotiate. He was not going to stop. If Director Seo had not intervened, my mother would be dead. The man is alive. He will face a court. But if there had been no court available, if the choice had been between his freedom and my mother's life, I would have made the choice you're afraid of, and I would make it again." The words landed with the weight of absolute honesty. He didn't soften them, didn't qualify them. He stood in the truth of who he was and let her see it. Yuna breathed. The cold air burned her lungs. Bomi leaned harder against her leg. "I can't pretend that doesn't scare me," she said. "I know. But I also can't pretend I wouldn't make the same choice if someone I loved was going to die." He looked at her. Something shifted in his expression, not relief, something more profound. The recognition of being seen completely, including the parts that most people couldn't look at directly and not being abandoned for it. "This is the cost," he said. "The one my mother warned you about, and it won't be the last time you pay it." "I know. Are you staying?" She crossed the distance between them, took his hand, the one without blood on the sleeve, held it. "I'm staying, not because this is easy, because you told me the truth when you could have lied, and because the man who would kill to protect his mother is the same man who crouches to pet my dog and leaves tea for me every morning. I'm not choosing one half of you. I'm choosing all of it." His fingers tightened around hers. He pulled her forward against his chest, into his arms. He held her with a force that was absolute and a gentleness that was deliberate, and she felt his heartbeat and the warmth of his body and the particular tension of a man who had just been given something he was terrified of losing. He pressed his lips to the top of her head. "Then stay," he said, and for the first time, the word carried no weight of command. It was simple. The sound of a man who had found the one thing his power could not buy and was asking the universe to let him keep it. Soon he came home on a Tuesday. She navigated the compound with the ease of a woman reclaiming territory, scolding the cook for using too much gochugaru, critiquing the garden's pruning from a hospital bed's worth of mental redesign, and adopting Bomi with grandmotherly authority that brooked no negotiation. "This dog saved my life. She eats from the good bowls now." Bomi accepted the promotion with the grace of an animal who had always suspected she deserved better. That first afternoon, Yuna found Soon-hee standing alone in the courtyard, looking at the maple tree. "I used to stand here with his father," Soon-hee said without turning. "After difficult nights, we planted this tree the year Yi-won was born." She touched the bark with the tenderness of greeting an old friend. "It survived everything we survived, the early years, the expansion years, the year his father died when I wasn't sure either of us would last the winter. It's beautiful. It's stubborn like everything in this family." She turned. "I want to say something and I want you to hear it as truth." "Okay. My son is a different man since you entered this house. Not softer, he'll never be soft, but more present, more willing to sit without a purpose, more willing to be silent with someone instead of only silent alone." She gripped Yuna's arm. "I spent 23 years watching his father carry the weight without ever putting it down. It killed him. Not a bullet, the weight. The loneliness. I've been terrified for 20 years my son would die the same way. You're the first person who's made me believe he won't. He's not alone anymore." "No, and neither are you." She released Yuna's arm and walked toward the house. At the door, "Now help me reorganize the kitchen. That cook has been unsupervised for 3 months and the spice cabinet is an abomination." That evening, the first proper gathering since Soon-hee's return. The kitchen alive with activity. Staff cooking with the energy of people feeding someone they were glad to feed. Minjai appeared in a simple dress that made her look younger and somehow more formidable. Director Seo, arm in a sling from the attack he'd intercepted, sat at the end of the table and argued with the cook about whether the galbi needed more sesame oil. Hyun-sik leaned against the doorframe eating a dumpling he'd stolen before the food was served, and when Soon-hee told him to sit down and eat properly, he obeyed immediately. The feared enforcer reduced to a scolded nephew by a 68-year-old woman with a cane. Uncle Taesung sat beside Soon-hee with the quiet satisfaction of a man watching a family reconstitute itself, his weathered hands folded on the table, his eyes warm when he looked at her, and unreadable when they moved to anyone else. Yuna took it all in, the faces around this table, the people who had built and protected and nearly lost this family. Any one of them would die for the man at the head of the table. She believed that completely. She also understood, with a clarity that the last 2 weeks had sharpened to a fine edge, that loyalty and love were not the same thing, and that the most dangerous betrayals came from the people closest to the center. Kang Yi-won entered. No suit tonight. Dark sweater, white collar, hair slightly disarranged, the armor off. He looked at his mother, at Yuna, at the dog under the table, at the people who were his world gathered in warmth and noise. He caught Yuna's hand as she passed, threading his fingers through hers. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For knocking." She leaned up and kissed the corner of his mouth, quick, warm in front of everyone. His hand tightened on hers. Behind his eyes, something ignited. They sat, they ate. The table was full, galbi and japchae and kongnamulguk, and a doenjang jjiggy that soon he pronounced adequate, barely before eating 3 bowls. She told stories from Yiwon's childhood. The neighborhood children he'd organized into a structured hierarchy to negotiate better snack prices. The encyclopedia of marine biology he'd read in a weekend before announcing he'd be an oceanographer. The thunderstorms he'd watched through the window with an expression of total concentration, as if taking notes. He never changed, Soon he said, pointing her chopsticks at her son. He just got taller and the storms got bigger. Minjai hid a smile behind her wine glass. Hyun-sik barked a laugh that startled even himself. Director Seo shook his head. Uncle Taesung watched it all with those warm, unreadable eyes. Bomi stole a piece of galbi from a plate left too close to the edge, and Yuna pretended not to see. And Yiwon pretended not to see Yuna pretending. And for one moment, the most powerful man in Seoul was just a man at a table with his mother and his girl and a thieving dog, and the world outside didn't exist. The spring air came through open windows carrying the scent of new leaves. Seoul hummed beyond the walls, vast and irrelevant. Inside, there was laughter and warmth and chopsticks against ceramic, and a mother's voice telling stories her son would never have told about himself. And in the middle of it, Kang Yiwon's phone vibrated once. He read the message beneath the table. His expression didn't change. His posture didn't shift. He laughed at the right moment when his mother reached her punchline, poured wine for Minjai. To anyone watching, a man at peace. Beneath the table, his other hand closed into a fist. The message was from his intelligence chief, a single line. The Halong's captain talked. Liang Wei wasn't the client, he was the contractor. Someone hired him. The name traces to someone inside your inner circle, working on confirmation. He put the phone away. He looked at Yuna across the table, laughing, her face open and luminous in candlelight. He looked at his mother, alive and fierce and home. He looked at Minjai, who met his eyes and held them because she had received the same message, and the look between them was the look of two soldiers who have just learned the war is not over. Then he looked around the table, at Director Seo, whose arm was in a sling because he'd taken a blade meant for someone else, at Hyun-sik, who had killed for this family and would again, at Uncle Taesung, his father's oldest friend, the only man alive who used his childhood nickname, whose warm eyes met his across the table with what looked like love. Someone at this table, someone in this room, someone who had access to his mother, his security protocols, and the woman he loved. Liang Wei was a weapon. Someone else had aimed him. And that someone was close enough to touch. He lifted his glass. He drank. He set it down. And the most dangerous man in Seoul felt the ground shift beneath the life he was trying to build, and understood with the cold clarity that had kept him alive for 24 years that the real enemy had been inside the walls the entire time. Across the table, Yuna caught his eye, tilted her head a question. "Are you okay?" He gave her the smallest nod. "I'm fine." The lie was seamless. It had to be. Because the truth was that, until he knew which face the betrayal wore, every person in this house was both family and suspect. The man who had taken the blade. The man who had guarded every door. The man who had known his mother's routine since before he was born. One of them had sold her to a concrete room and 91 days of darkness. And somewhere in the city, in a room with no light, a phone rang. A voice answered, calm, measured, familiar. A voice that had sat at this table tonight. That had laughed at the right moments. That had looked at Kang Yiwon with what appeared, to everyone watching, like love. "He thinks it's finished," the voice said. "Good. Let him enjoy tonight. Let him hold the girl's hand and believe the worst is over. The next one won't be a contractor from Guiyang. The next one will come from someone he trusts, and by the time he sees it, it will be too late." The line went dead. The voice poured a drink. And in the silence of that dark room, a plan that had been building for years moved into its final phase.